Mayor Pro Tem Barr.
Here.
Councilmember Reichart.
Here.
Councilmember Grove. Here. Councilmember Driscoll.
Here.
Councilmember Ryden. Here. Councilmember Peters. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. As you're able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, Council, everyone's had a chance to review the agenda. There is one change to the agenda, general business items C, D, and E. The resolutions authorizing IGAs with the Arapahoe, Douglas, and Jefferson counties for the conduct and administration of a coordinated election November 5th, 2024, will be heard after the second reading and public hearing of ordinance number 21 of 2024, submitting to the registered electors of the city of Littleton, Colorado, a ballot issue regarding a proposed additional sales tax increase on the retail sale of marijuana and retail marijuana products. So unless there's any objection with that, the agenda with its change is approved. I clicked on a button. I don't know where I am now. So, all right. Next up, we have item 4, which is proclamations. There are none. Item 5, public comment period. Public comment period is a time for members of the community to come address council and staff with issues that they may have before us. Everyone will have 3 minutes to address council. I'll let you know when you get to 3 minutes. We ask that comments be civil, disrespectful, disruptive behavior not be tolerated. Council is not authorized under open meeting laws to take action at this meeting on any issue raised by public comment. That's not part of tonight's agenda. And so I'll go through the list here. We have signed up. We've got 4 people signed up. We have first up, Rich. If you could just state your name and address or district when you come up, please.
Sure, Rich Littleton, and I'll give this to her for the record. You want to see it? Okay, ready? Get 3 minutes? Okay. Houseless, homeless, roof over thy head issue, 760-681-4926. 760-681-4926. Call me to start an actual direly needed coalition to stop this absurd and ever-increasing madness from government and much of the community, if and only if you have a working conscience, not just lip service of how good, right, caring you are, but in fact live and let live in your actions, more importantly, in your inactions to strangers. Let's legalize a euthanasia pill, yeah, that's right, a euthanasia pill that allows the mature brick and mortar houseless adults to leave this abject nightmare they face in your town, this state, this country, peacefully, lovingly, painlessly, with family and friends all around, to finally release them from the sheer ignorance, shameless hypocrisy, utter void of actual decency, respect, and a simple letting people take care of themselves in the way they see fit. In your, quote, deep spirituality, superiority, virtuousness, you tenaciously claim to be, let's just, your words not mine, let's just once and for all get rid of this scourge, the lazy, the bums, the drug addicts, the mentally disturbed, the eyesores, the property value depreciators, the vagrants, the do-nothings, the perverts, the leeches, and the parasites. By allowing them to be done with this mentality of monstrous evil masquerading as all good, right, and the American way. You too, please, Stanford professor Dr. Robert Sapolsky, his book Determined, for steeply researched academic condemnation of this depraved mentality. Thank you very much.
Next up is Karen Talentire.
Hello. And you may have heard Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters got convicted of taking an image of the election machine before and after records were deleted by Dominion. This is not true. The judge specifically said she committed no crime in doing her job in taking that image. In fact, the judge excluded election information from the trial. The counts she was convicted of, and which she is appealing, were about hiding information from public officials whom she had reason to suspect were committing felonies. And she proved it too. Since 2021, the Secretary of State has made herself the authority over everything about Colorado elections. That would also make her the one responsible for everything illegal that happens in Colorado elections. For instance, we have Colorado Revised Statutes 110-105, election, which is Election Results Certification by Secretary of State, Part 4. Is this better? Okay, thank you. So, Colorado Revised Statutes. In the event that an accurate and verifiable determination of the count cannot be made, and therefore the Secretary of State is unable to certify the election of any candidate, the Secretary shall issue a report indicating the nature of the irregularity rather than issue a certification. We aren't even at the election, but we already know it is not possible for the Secretary of State to certify it. As you heard a few weeks ago from United Sovereign Americans' examination of Colorado voter data, in the most recent election, the Help America Vote Act requires not more than 21 errors in the state of Colorado. This act refers to the voting system standard of the Federal Election Commission, Section 3.2.1, which says the error rate is, quote, set at a sufficiently stringent level such that the likelihood of voting system errors affecting the outcome of an election is exceptionally remote, even in the closest of elections. And I think we would all agree that 21 errors in the whole state is, in fact, pretty stringent. But that's not what we had. We had over 100,000 errors. That is not close to being legally valid. That is 4 orders of magnitude worse than the maximum allowed for a legally valid election. Have you heard anyone even suggesting looking into this problem, much less fixing it? I haven't. That means our systems make a legally valid election impossible even before we start. If the Secretary of State issues a certification, we can know right now it is fraudulent because our systems that create our voter rolls are so bad, it is not possible for her to know what the result of the election is. I want you, on behalf of the citizens of Littleton, to call out this uncertifiable election and demand our right to a legitimate election. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Patricia Kronenberger.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Pat Kronenberger, President of South Metro Land Conservancy. Throughout much of our 32-year history, we have advocated and preserved open space, much of it at South Platte Park, but also including Winnetka Ponds Park, the Bijou Basin Open Space, and the Marjorie Perry Preserve. In recent years, we have been very focused on connecting people to nature and helping them understand the importance of the natural areas in their neighborhood parks. These areas provide important habitat close to home and create opportunities for children to enjoy and learn about nature. Our all-volunteer board commits a great deal of energy to participating in public processes such as the Kettering-Gallup Master Plan and master plans for South Suburban and Arapahoe County open spaces. We often have a table at your Meet, Greet, and Eats, and we sponsor a variety of animals from South Platte Park, which are always a big hit with people of all ages. And as partners with GOCO's Generation Wild, we participate in programs that get kids outdoors. But it's our work with Powers Park that brings me here tonight. We are delighted to tell you that the park's design is now in the hands of the South Suburban Planning Team, and we're very impressed with the care that they are devoting to addressing the goals of the South Metro Land Conservancy funded vision plan. As most of you are aware, Powers Park's main purpose is to serve as a stormwater detention facility to minimize local flooding, but it has minimal park amenities. When South Metro Housing Options was planning the overlook at Powers Park, they talked with us about how Powers Park might be improved for its future residents. And since improvements to Powers Park were neither in the city's CIP or South Suburban's, SMLC funded the vision plan to get the process rolling. SMLC also thought it would be a great opportunity to design a park that had greater potential to connect people to nature close to home, especially in a very dense part of the city with a lot of apartments and high-density housing. It ain't gonna happen. Hello? We're here. Okay, I'm almost done. So of course, the build-out of the park improvements will also depend on future budget funding from South Suburban, the city, and grants. I do want to share our annual newsletter, which is hot off the press. I've given Colleen copies of it to distribute to you, and I've also brought in the ever-popular Generation Wild What to Do Before You're 12 list, which is very popular with people of all ages, so enjoy. Thank you.
Best thing I can suggest is we take a quick recess and I can
That works. We'll take it.
You're working.
I'm working now, so. They're all green on the. Just me? All right, yeah. Let me try deactivate. Okay, we'll take a 5 or recess for how long it takes to get our mics fixed.
I'll take this opportunity to remind council.
integrated drainage way and a system solution, and then this study would be in context of that. Second, the Broadway corridor. I'd like to ask you to revise it, to ask staff to include a view easement at Cayley from the Highline Canal toward Denver. It's not in there. It's a huge opportunity for Littleton. I know many people can't see it now. I can. It is a great opportunity. It's a huge part of Littleton's history. The agriculture area that was opened up by the High Line brought Denver's Broadway into Littleton. I can't talk more about that right now, but please add the view shed and view easement. And I guess I'm out of time for the executive session. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak? Frank?
Good evening, City Council. I'm Frank Atwood, and I live in District 4. It is true, once again, I'm here to advocate for approval voting, alternative voting methods, but especially approval voting. Traditionally, honey is more persuasive than vinegar. However, myself and Councilmember Reichard are trying to prove that chocolate may work even better. I ask that when you take chocolate from Councilmember Reichard's candy box, that you consider you're using a form of approval voting. You can take one, you can take some, you could take all but one if you really wanted to. So, I'm not a chocolate connoisseur, so I do not appreciate the nuances between Hershey chocolates and Mars chocolates, which might be analogous to differences between major political parties. I'm grateful to Councilmember Reichard providing chocolate, and I do not mean to be competitive with or abuse his generosity, but at moments I do take more than one piece. I think of Hershey's and Mars as being the dominant political parties with a wide spectrum of primary products. Hershey has 754 products from the internet. Most familiar are Crackle, Mr. Goodbar, milk chocolate, dark chocolate. Mars has M&M's, Snickers, Orbit, and Skittles. Approval voting is described as vote for one, or vote for some, or vote for all but one. I consider Councilmember Reichard's candy box to be take one or some. Although in general elections you may only be tempted to vote for only one candidate, I suspect in primary elections you might be more likely to vote for more than one if approval voting were enabled by our legislature. Again, I ask that when you take chocolate from Councilmember Reichard's candy box, that you consider you may be using a form of approval voting. Thank you, Councilmember Reichard, for your generosity, and all the rest of you. Also, if you'd like to come to an Atwood Supple potato party this Friday evening from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, please see me for an invitation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Frank. Is there anybody else in the audience that wish to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, we are going to move on to comments and reports. I'll start with Councilmember Driscoll.
No report, thanks.
Councilmember Ryden.
Yes, I have an update to my council members on Tri-Cities homelessness. I mentioned last week that the Severe Weather Shelter Network is no longer providing services. And they're not only providing services not to our area, but across the board. They're basically closing their doors. And they were the ones that housed probably 40 to 60 unhoused people during the cold winter nights. So that's been a big gap. Another provider has kind of stepped up and said they're willing to take over that responsibility. They're looking for funding that they think they'll be able to get from Arapahoe County, some of it, but it also looks like we might need to have some skin in the game, at least for this next year, until we can come up with a permanent solution. So be on the lookout possibly for a budgetary request. Probably would not be monetary huge, because again, we think that the county can come through and fund some of what they're asking for. And again, keep in mind, this is kind of an emergency request because it's coming so soon. We only have a couple months until, the snow and the severe weather is going to start. And the state of local affairs also might be able to help cushion this organization to take it over. So I'll keep you all abreast as needed. That's all.
Councilmember Peters.
Yeah, I have a few things. I was going to mention the Littleton Community Retreat, which is coming up September 13th and 14th. The topic this year is sustainability. I think the cost is $25 to register, but there's a couple of cool events, a bike ride and some other things. So that's on the website if that's of interest. I was also going to mention the Business Chamber is sponsoring Littleton Restaurant Week, September 6th through 15th. Bunch of restaurants participate, do specials, things like that. So eat local. Also, I'm part of the Littleton Leadership Academy, which has been a great experience. It's not a small commitment. It's 10 months and it's a full Friday, the third Friday of each month, but it's been really, really helpful. So if that is something that's of interest to anyone wanting to get involved or know how the city works, I would highly recommend it. I will be part of the graduating class in October, so that will be fun. And then Dr. Cog has a similar sort of leadership program, and I think you can apply for that before August 23rd, which is, I think, a 7-week program. And then the final thing I was going to mention is Councilmember Driscoll mentioned a few times the upcoming fishing derby, which was last Saturday, and my son won, which I didn't see coming. So we have his trophy on our counter. He's very proud. So.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No report.
Councilmember Grove?
Yeah, a couple things. I had a call from somebody who was thinking about running for city council in their community in California, and I was talking about what we did, and he was asking me what kind of time commitment. And I talked about that we have a lot of events here in Littleton. He says, well, we don't have events. We have so many things going on in our community to bring people together, to have a lot of fun, that sometimes I think we take them for granted. A couple things that were happening recently is the Meet, Greet, and Eat. We had the last one of the summer at Harlow Park, and they just dedicated a new playground there that day. And it was a fun event. We have 3 of them each summer, and so that was the last one. We'll have more next summer, hopefully. And then, of course, our wonderful Western Welcome Week was this last week. And one of the things I participated in was they had a silent auction here at the city center and also a wine tasting and pizza and ice cream. And it was a lot of fun. It's just like a big city party. And then, of course, our Western Welcome Parade. And we were in the parade, and it was a wonderful event. The mayor did some judging. So I sometimes think when we hear about all these things that we are very, very lucky in our community. One of the next events is our last Little Jam on September 14th at Stern Park, and that starts at 5:30. So that is kind of the end of the summer events. Of course, we'll have other events, but not probably the frequency we do in the warm weather.
Willy Wonka over there?
I just want to say, you're all welcome to take one or as many pieces of chocolate as you would like. And then I also want to just say thank you to the volunteers with Western Welcome Week, Inc. They put on a fantastic celebration this week, and I am grateful that that's part of my community, and I'm grateful I got to participate in it. So that's it.
And then I just wanted to say that we have remind council and public that we have a joint study session with South Suburban Parks and Rec tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the Bloom Room, and with South Inglewood and the South Platte Renew at 8 a.m. on Thursday in the South Platte Room. Both those are on the calendar. I assume they were up there before. I don't know. They're ahead of the meeting. So, and then I do believe that the city manager, speaking of Western Welcome Week, sang the national anthem at which event was that? Or maybe you could just do a rendition during your manager report.
I might take a pass on that last offer, but it was the Western Welcome Week parade, and it was a whole lot of fun. So, thanks to that organization for involving me.
Great. Well, that's all I have. So I'll turn it back over to the city manager for his report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things from me tonight. To Council Member Ryden's important news about the severe weather shelter. Our staff has been working on identifying a very small amount of funding that can be collaborative with the city of Englewood and the county to at least
help get some of the vouchers going, some of the infrastructure in place for those who need that service this winter, and I believe we have found $5,000 to contribute along with Englewood just in the interim here. Second thing is we've made a lot of progress this past couple weeks on the neighborhood housing options. You see updates. I want to let council and the public know that we have released our survey for the public to hear from the public about this missing middle housing and what some of the options could be and how the community feels. That URL for the survey was included with the Littleton report online that was released last week. We're also going to be putting that out on all of our social media channels, I believe tomorrow. So that will be out. That'll be open through September 9th. In parallel with that, I'll let the council know that we have assembled a stakeholder working group for the project, as we discussed at a recent meeting. And that group is comprised of experts or those with technical expertise on missing middle housing types, and so that includes architects working on this type of housing, also one representative of the Planning Commission, representative from Habitat for Humanity, and a couple of board members from South Metro Housing Options. So we'll finalize this list and put that out to the council and the public over the next week. I'll probably have something at your next meeting, just so that we can announce that further, but we're trying to move this quickly so that we can fully engage that group to be part with our staff in developing those recommended code changes. That's what I have on that tonight, Mayor, and I'll just stop my comments there.
Thanks. City Attorney, any report?
No, I will just say that I did offer to beatbox for the city manager. He politely declined. So nothing further.
I'd make a motion to hear him beatbox.
Motion.
Just saying.
I don't hear a second, so the motion dies. Next up is item 7 is scheduled appearances. We have one scheduled appearance tonight. We have Maureen Shannon with North Littleton Promise here to talk about 2024, the local partnership funding grant.
If I had known it would be this fun, maybe I would be here a little bit more often, but I appreciate.
It's always this fun. You should come every week.
I appreciate the levity. I am Maureen Shannon with North Littleton Promise. I'm the executive director. And it is really, I just want to say thank you for having me, city council members, mayor, and city staff. So it's really fun. I was chatting with Kathleen before, and I said, it's just really great to have an opportunity to come. And so while that is like a stipulation of the stadium grant funds, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So that's authentic. So we were awarded, I think, around $48,000 of the stadium funds for this year. And we have spent so far around $36,000. We asked for money for 3 different things. We asked for money to expand our youth programming with helping fund a staff member. Now, this photo, Corey is really buried in the back of this photo. I don't know if I can I don't think I can zoom in or anything, but this is some of our middle school students eating the summer. Graceful brought food over for them. And so we have expanded our middle school programming from 1 day to 2 days with the help of that grant money. And I'll keep moving forward. Wait, okay. Clicker. Right key. Nope. Now I've messed up.
Nope, you're fine.
Thank you.
Just don't touch the microphone.
Right,
Just
whatever
don't
you
touch
do.
Thank you.
You can just use.
Just this?
Yes.
All right, I can do that. Okay. Another part of our grant funding that you all generously provided. Thank thank you. Look at that. Was for furniture. We are, as you know, we've just completed 1 year at the East Community Center, and we are trying to transform a elementary school into a space that is warm and welcoming for not just elementary school kids. And so this is some of the furniture that we've purchased for our middle school, or for our high school student room, actually. This is full of kids, which is a lot more fun. And then we have some furniture that we purchased for our middle school space, which is here, and then kids using the furniture. This is we ran a summer program for 5 weeks, and so they're actively using all of that furniture you all so generously provided money for. Doing all kinds of things. Everything is done on those tables in that room. The third thing, which is the most significant chunk of the grant, was to buy a van. So this is our new wheels, which goes with like our new digs, right? Like new wheels, new digs. We now have 2 vans, and that helps us with our field trips during the summer, during our summer programming. But it also helps us when we pick up our middle schoolers for a program during the week. One of the staff members goes to Euclid and picks up, and then another person goes and picks up kids that come from Goddard, from the neighborhood. And so to have 2 different vehicles, they happen at the same time. So to have 2 different vehicles to do that is really helpful. So that was that. And here we go, some of our summer staff in front of the van, or in back of the van, I suppose, and kids inside of it. So we are already, now it's the nice van. The other one is like really old. And so this one has the air conditioning. So there's a little bit of battling over who gets to ride in the air-conditioned van. These kids won. So that is how y'all have funded North Littleton Promise through the stadium grant funds. I'm really thankful for the timing. I was sharing with Kathleen that the timing of this grant has been really helpful. Obviously, we needed funds to be able to expand programming in our space, in our new space at East. So that's been really helpful to us. And I wanted to also just give you some updates related to some of our program expansion. We run, if you don't know, we run after-school programming for elementary, middle school, high school students. We partner with Colorado United and have 4 soccer teams in partnership with them. We run summer programs in the summer. That's how we serve students, elementary through high school. And then we're working with parents. We have a weekly parent group that meets. We do monthly meetings with them to either introduce resources or stay connected to them and help them navigate things as well. And then we do some trainings with them on one-on-one coaching when they need that. And so in our space at East, we've been able to expand what we do. So this fall, we're expanding, like I said, from 1 day to 2 days for middle school students. We're offering a conversational English class for our parents that they've been asking for a while. And there are other organizations that do that in the community. However, our parents want to come, drop off their kiddos, and stay for their own program. And so that's why we responded in that way. We're also offering a Spanish class for community members with a local, a good friend that's a Spanish teacher in Cherry Creek School District. She's going to come and do Spanish classes. So if any of y'all are interested, please let me know. That'll be on Tuesday nights as well. Some of the one-off opportunities that we've had, not one-off, but expansion opportunities at East. We've partnered with a local therapeutic office that's actually coming to us to do therapy with a couple of our students on site at East, which is a familiar space, a safe space, easy to navigate. And so we've gotten 2 kids connected to therapy this summer that really need that. And then part of the benefit of being in this shared space at East is just the opportunity for collaboration and partnerships, both with the partners there, but also I can't tell you how many times I get emails saying, hey, this is, we're this organization, and are there ways that we could partner together to serve this community better? So there's things in the hopper with Mikasa Resource Center. They're working on coming down, and we're hoping to get some parents introduced to some of their services. Denver Urban Gardens is looking at, potential partnership with East. as well, and we're part of that, and also with Littleton Public Schools. So we're working on a potential program focusing on kids age 0 to 3. So there's a lot of opportunities to grow our organization and grow our impact in that Northeast Littleton community. And then just from a backdoor perspective, you know, we have now the staffing to put more time and energy into fundraising and development, which obviously as you grow programs, you have to do that. And so now we finally have staff to be able to grow that, which is a wonderful opportunity for us to have. On that note, we have a fiesta that I think you all have been invited to. It's on September 27th, and would love to have you come and join us for that. Do you all have any questions for me?
Council, any questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, you mentioned East Community Center and how that's become a hub. If you had recommendations to council, I would, you don't have to have an answer right now, but if you had further recommendations as to how council can support the community center in general moving forward, not just North Littleton Promise specifically, we would welcome that from, you know, yourself, obviously, and the other participants there. But does anything come to mind, any immediate needs and concerns that where we would be able to partnership with LPS?
I don't know about immediate needs and concerns. I would encourage you all to be aware of, you guys do so much, and I really appreciate the way, you know, you talked about the events that I love living in Littleton. I love this place, and you all do so much, and I appreciate that. I'm gonna leave at that. And the calendar, just being aware of what's happening at the calendar and showing up at meetings, whether it's just a community meal that Graceful Cafe is bringing over, showing up. Break Bread distributes food every Wednesday to anybody who shows up. Like my family got a meal over the summer when we had a rough week, and let's just go to get Break Bread and bring food home. So anytime, some of those things are just a great opportunity to interface, you know, with the community that you may not be interacting with that segment of the community. And so we would love for you to show up at any of those community events. Yeah.
Thanks. Councilmember Ryden?
More of just a comment, but just thank you for everything that your organization does. You know, you are one of the primary organizations that really serves our Latino population, and so I really appreciate those efforts. And maybe one question would be, if you're noticing things that community needs that we could do better as a city council, I'd be very open in hearing your feedback or perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that it is hard work to build relationships inside that community. And I've had multiple conversations with folks on city staff and also city council members about what that looks like. So I'd love to be a part of that conversation. I'd love to help facilitate that. I'd love to, I talked to council member, I almost said Robert. Okay, all right. But council member Robert, it's like friendly but formal. About coming to some of our meetings, to be able to be like a regular presence and a familiar face. I feel like that is a really, and Roberts, represents our district, so that makes a lot of sense. But showing up and building relationship that is the ground level work. So that when things come up and when there are concerns or issues, and I know there's been some safety concerns in on Powers recently, which after Robert brought it up to me, I got some feedback from some community members about some concerns and some fear. But they're not going to initiate a conversation with Robert until they know him, and that goes for y'all too. So it's really a layer. It seems so basic, but it takes a lot of time to build those relationships and show up, and then it opens up opportunities for feedback and being able to meet needs when they come up. So, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Well, I just want to say thanks for coming down and
Thank you.
showing this. It's great to see
thank you.
images and see all the good work that these funds are doing. I know when council discusses things, often we're talking hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, and these funds may seem like a small amount, but to see how much good they can do in organizations like yours to get out there and really impact the community. So that's
Thank you.
really
It's
great.
really significant to us. I
Yes.
mean,
Just to
your
see
grant
how
was a
small
significant.
amounts can be really significant.
Right, yes.
Right.
It was really significant. So the impact is felt, for sure. So thank you. Thank you,
Great.
Mayor.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Next up, item 8 is the consent agenda. We have 4 items on consent agenda. Consent agenda items may be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title. Prior to vote on the motion, any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. A, Resolution 92, 2024, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Littleton and Arapahoe County Open Spaces for the 2024 Grant Award regarding the Littleton Community Trail Extension Plan. B, Resolution 93, 2024, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Littleton and Arapahoe County Open Spaces for the 2024 Grant Award regarding the Santa Fe Drive Regional Trail Connection Plan. C, Resolution 94, 2024, approving an intergovernmental agreement with Mile High Flood District regarding funding of major drainage way planning and flood hazard area delineation for Slaughterhouse Gulch. And D, ID 24-200, motion to approve the minutes of the August 6, 2024 regular meeting of City Council.
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. Any further discussion? All right, voting is open.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Great, thanks. On 9, general business, we have 4 items in general business, but 3 of them, B, C, and D, will be moved after, tabled to after the ordinances on second reading public hearing. So up first, we have ID 24-203, the Broadway Corridor Study Report. So we'll have staff presentation to give council an update on this report, and there's no action by council. This is just a general report. So, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This corridor study has been in the works for some time at the staff level and with our Transportation Mobility Board. This is a multi-jurisdictional project whereby we've been collaborating with the cities of Centennial and Englewood and Denver, and then CDOT and several others, really just to bring some foundational agreements together around future planning at the concept level for the Broadway corridor. I think the headline for me, if there is one, is that our city was just one kind of member of this collaboration, and it was an opportunity for us to incorporate and embed the multimodal transportation values that the council has been talking about, has given us direction on. We were able to work with our regional partners to put those on the table, and I think while this is a concept level study, and the work was done mostly with our TMB and staff, I think the real work will come in the future. There isn't any funding necessarily designated for the projects outlined in this study, but as funding is and as the opportunities come to priority for council through our capital program, that's when the council will have some real input on design, what these various what these various locations will actually look like. So with that, I'll turn it over to our staff and our consultant partner to give an overview of the study. Take it away, guys.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Brent Soderlin, Director of Public Works and Utilities. I'm going to turn this presentation over to Shane Roberts, our Senior Transportation Planner, and Keith Borsheim, who's a Transportation Planner and Project Manager for HDR.
All right. Well, I was going to turn over to Aaron. Okay. No, all right. Good evening, City Council. My name is Shane Roberts. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with the City of Littleton, but we've had a lot of FaceTime together lately, so I think you guys know that. So we'll get started, but before we kind of kick off the agenda, I was going to let Keith introduce himself. So go ahead, Keith.
Good evening, Keith Borsheim. Is this working?
Oh,
No. How about now? Oh, boy. Keith Borsheim, HDR. I'm a transportation planner there.
All right. And there was also some other staff members who we should recognize. So Aaron Human was involved pretty heavily, as well as Kenna Davis, who's behind me over here. Also, Emily Kleinfelter, who is now with the City of Littleton, was actually Dr. Cog's rep throughout the project. So we have lots of good staff working on it. So I heard you guys were in a lot of meetings today, so we'll try to be brief, but happy to answer any questions. So here's the agenda. The long and short of it is this. We'll give you a quick update on the background of the project. We'll talk about the project itself and then the recommendations of the project, and we'll talk about next steps and where we go from here. So. All right, so project background, the long and short of it is that the impetus for this project started back in 2018. So in 2018, RTD had a BRT feasibility study, and Broadway was identified as one of those corridors that was supposed to be funded for BRT in the near future. Because of that, staff thought, hey, this is a great opportunity. Oh, what is BRT? Thank you. So BRT is Bus Rapid Transit. And so we can get into the details of that, but it's enhanced transit, enhanced bus service. And so Broadway was identified as one of the corridors that RTD wanted to put BRT on. And so we thought we'd get ahead of it as staff. And so we applied for TIP funding, which is a grant opportunity to address some of the issues that we know were on Broadway already, to make sure that those were incorporated as part of the study or dealt with ahead of the BRT efforts from RTD. We applied for that in 2019. It was waitlisted. 2021, we received notice that there was additional funding to fund our study. You might be aware that between 2019 and 2021, there was a few things that impacted transportation around the world. And so originally the study was slotted to look at just the Littleton portion of Broadway. But when we got the funding, we decided that it was prudent to actually take a step back and see what is actually needed on Broadway. And so rather than just focus on our section of the corridor, we decided to engage our partners on the corridor and say, hey, can we do a regional study that really sets, rather than just looking at the problems that we have on Broadway, really set forth a comprehensive vision and a comprehensive plan for the Broadway corridor. And so that's kind of the background. So we reached out to all the jurisdictions that you see here, and all of them were on board. And so I don't know if I mentioned the extents before, but before it was from Bellevue to County Line Road. And when we took a step back, we decided to expand that area all the way up to Broadway and I-25 and down into Douglas County at the Highlands Ranch Town Center Park and Ride. So it's a pretty big project, but all these jurisdictions were on board. And I think another thing that's worth highlighting on this slide is that way back in 2019, when we did the TMP, which Keith was also a part of, one of the things that HDR found is that Littleton used to be a regional leader when it comes to transportation, but in the years leading up to the TMP, we had really kind of lost that reputation and that standing in the community. So we thought this was a great opportunity to kind of re-step into that role of being a regional leader when it comes to transportation. So all the jurisdictions that were on that previous slide, you can imagine it's a lot, right? And there was a lot of communication. And on the front end, our goal in reaching out to our partners was really, we don't want this to be a vision of Broadway that Littleton creates and nobody else likes, and then it's a document that sits on the shelf, right? So there was lots of communication. And this slide here goes into some of those details about all the meetings that we had. And I'll spare you the details, but on a light month, we met about twice with all the partners and the consultant team and everybody like that. But on a heavy month, we met 5 times. So there was lots of coordination, and we're very happy, we're very proud of all the time that the other jurisdictions put in and all the resources and effort that they brought to the table. All right, so this was all the background information, and we're going to dive into a video here that really kind of shows visually the recommendations from this study, right? But as we're going into that, and hopefully all the video and audio works, but I think there's some things that you guys should look out for in this video. Over the last years, we've had a lot of FaceTime with City Council. There's been a lot of goals, a lot of objectives that you guys have said these are things that are important when it comes to transportation and important when it comes to the City of Littleton. And I think you'll see that in this video. I know. What's that? Yeah, I know we've had like minor issues, but like.
I said it was gonna be a short meeting. Ooh,
Oh.
hang on, are
Shane,
we,
you back?
we broadcasting? We got mics.
How's the video?
All right, well, we'll see. I think you'll see a lot of the values that you guys have endorsed over the last year and the many conversations with us are present in this video and in what Keith shared. So without further ado, hopefully we do not have sound, I don't think.
Broadway between
So we
I-25
will
and
post
Highlands
this,
Ranch
on the city's
Parkway
YouTube
is a
channel,
vibrant
so it'll be
corridor
available
where
to see
people
the
live,
sound and
work,
everything like that.
eat, and shop.
The computer
The City of
itself.
Littleton partnered with several agencies along the 11-mile stretch to conduct the Broadway Corridor Study and develop conceptual designs to improve
There's music.
safety,
There's also somebody
transit,
talking. I think we
pedestrian,
can
and bike
skip
experience
ahead
will celebrate and
to
foster
some of the
economic vibrant
visualizations
spaces.
that HDR
Achieving
did that
Imagining
really kinda show
Broadway
what the
along
corridor could
Broadway,
be.
let's talk about the
These
wide and detached pedestrian improvements include
go.
wide and detached sidewalks,
So you see,
attractive
a cycle track,
streetscapes such as
which is, you know,
trees,
a dedicated
lighting,
bike
seating,
facility
and
behind the
artwork,
curb. You see wide
safer
sidewalks.
crossings, and new destinations for people to gather.
Yeah.
Bicycle improvements include raised bikeways that are separated from vehicles, protected
you also see some
intersections
of the
to
urban
decrease
design
speeds
elements,
and
so
improve
people touched a little
visibility,
bit on that about
east and
kind of
west
identifying
connectivity
areas
to
where we
our
can really,
regional bike networks,
investment,
and
things like
enhanced
that.
trail access. Transit improvements include 5-minute service throughout the day along the entire corridor, dedicated transit lanes
Here's
from
an example of a
I-25 to
dedicated
Bellevue
transit
Avenue,
lane, and so people
speed
get
and
into the areas of
reliability
the corridor
treatments,
that,
and
where that's
enhanced
recommended.
transit stops. Roadway improvements include safer access to residences, businesses,
Here's
and
actually
other
a section of,
destinations along
Broadway
Broadway,
within Littleton,
raised medians,
you know, where we
and
have,
infrastructure
residential
designs that
single-family homes
reduce
fronting the
dangerous
corridor.
speeding,
We
including
share
lane
the
width reductions
concept
and
to
tighter
accommodate those.
turns. Other improvements include designing community hubs to provide spaces along Broadway for the surrounding communities to come together and celebrate their unique identities. These hubs activate the streetscape by enhancing the pedestrian environment and spurring economic development. The City of Littleton and its regional partners will
All right, now
work toward
probably, I think
advancing
the
the
rest
most
of it is
important
talking and
aspects of
kinda
the
hitting on
vision,
some items that,
identify funding.
that Keith is going to talk about. So with that, I'll turn it over to Keith Borsheim with HDR.
Okay, I'm going to stand because I can't quite see everybody. Well. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Oh, here.
Is this one, this one just works? You guys hear me? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll advance this slide.
Here's the remote you want right here.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks Shane for that great intro. We at HDR, we actually were partnered with two other consulting firms, FHU and EPS. So lots of initials there for you guys to ponder, but two really great partners on the consulting side that helped us advance this study. So just wanted to shout them out, but Shane mentioned the vision and the goals that were generated for this project. I want to mention here this was a collaborative process with those partners that Shane identified, but he's right, these really do align really well with what was in the Transportation Master Plan. So I'm just going to read the vision aloud for those who can't quite see it. Broadway will celebrate and connect the unique identities of our communities, foster economic vibrancy, provide safe and comfortable spaces, and support regional mobility options for all. So that really captures what we hope to achieve through the implementation of the recommendations out of this study. And then we have the goals. I won't read all of the goals, but aligning it with the TMP and with regional DRCOG goals, safety being number one, trying to attain that Vision Zero that aligns with DRCOG's vision, connectivity, mobility, offering reliable and predictable transportation options. I think that's what we all hope for from our transportation system. Placemaking was highlighted as a key goal for the Broadway corridor. It's one of the key places within Littleton and within the other communities along the corridor. And then economic development, so we're hoping to foster increased economic vibrancy throughout the community, and sustainability, so helping us to achieve our statewide and regional sustainability goals and creating a corridor that we can maintain in the future. So those are the key goals. These goals were also developed with public engagement and were endorsed broadly by the public. So we had 4 primary phases of our engagement effort: at the study initiation, and then presenting the various alternatives that we developed and the potential screening for those alternatives. And then we did present the preferred alternative that you'll see here, and then also presenting the final report. We did present those in both in-person and digital formats. There was a project webpage. We conducted stakeholder interviews, which I'll go over a little bit, in-person public meetings and pop-up events, so going out to meet people where they are, and online surveys and project videos as well. You can see some of the numbers here. 137,000, I want to highlight that, is social media reach. So that's the number of people who actually saw a post about the Broadway Corridor Study. A really huge number, and we're really proud of that reach. And then we had, over 2,200 people actually visit the website. So really great feedback. Most of the people, you can see the feedback highlights here on the right, wanted more multimodal options with bike and ped focus, protected bike lanes, sidewalks, crosswalks, so really heavy on the ped and bike focus. Residential neighborhoods were called out, and then on the car side, addressing speeding. And then there was also this economic development piece of affordable housing and mixed-use development. So 87% of the survey respondents agreed with the goals, and then you can see the chart on the right here that shows how well the vision aligned with people's hopes for the corridor, and we had really good input on the vision. And then safety was the highest area of concern, improved sidewalks and crosswalks again, and then again, the improved landscaping also was highlighted. So, stakeholder interviews, I don't want to read this, but just to kind of highlight the outreach that we conducted on the stakeholder side. These are the 17 different stakeholder interviews that we conducted for everyone from the major hospitals and other major employers along the corridor to the public schools. And we did host a Broadway specific resident listening session for those people who live directly on the corridor. Key takeaways, inconsistency throughout the corridor, so those are including speed limits, the land use, the different identities, and trying to tie all that together while keeping the historic character. Safer and less congestion along the corridor was a key outcome of the outreach. Trail connections was highlighted, so providing those connections to those trails that cross the corridor, as well as connecting to the various trails along the corridor from, say, the Highline Canal to Lee Gulch or vice versa. And then I just want to highlight on the last bullet here, additional development and new housing. So, we've heard it a lot over the last few years, housing, providing opportunity for increased housing along these key transit corridors. So we combined all of those recommendations into various elements and then developed these alternatives that were presented to the public. Alternative 1 was BRT. It was really focused on moving people via transit, dedicated lanes throughout the entire corridor. Alternative 2 carried that theme forward just on the northern end of the corridor, so north of Littleton city limits. And then within Littleton itself, I kind of call it BRT light. So having some elements that speed buses up, make them more reliable, but without that dedicated lane. Alternative 3 did not include a dedicated lane. And then alternative 4 really didn't include a separate bike facility, so it's more of a shared use path throughout the corridor. So those are the key differences on the alternatives. The recommended alternative is alternative 2, which includes that dedicated lane north of Bellevue, which will help residents of Littleton who are accessing Denver and Englewood with increased speeds on transit in that area. And it also includes the off-street bike facility and separated sidewalks, wider and more separated sidewalks in Littleton. You can see what that looks like here on this concept on the right, and we can get a little bit more into the details here. So we did also highlight major and minor nodes throughout the corridor where we want to really emphasize the placemaking and those connections to the transit investments. Urban design elements at those community hub locations include spatial organization, so that just means making sure that people have places to linger versus places to move. adding focal points such as art and interaction spaces, green space, and then connectivity and accessibility to those transit corridors that also cross Broadway. Again, Shane mentioned the residential concepts, so we do recognize that there are homes that front Broadway, not just within Littleton, but also in Centennial. So we came up with a frontage road concept for those locations. This does generally fit within the existing right-of-way. It reduces the conflicts between the driveways and trash collection, that kind of thing. It slows traffic in front of the homes, provides comfortable space for bikes and peds. And there are some trade-offs, of course. You can't turn directly into your driveway anymore. There may be some access concerns for emergency vehicles that we would have to address in final design of this concept. And then, you know, a lot of these homes are across from auto dealerships, and so it kind of prevents that. It reduces the space for those deliveries for those auto dealerships. So we mentioned BRT. Just wanted to go over really quick what some of the BRT elements might be within the city of Littleton. Those include transit and speed and reliability improvements, such as signal priority. So that means if a bus is approaching a signal, it gets an extra green light so it can get through instead of having to hit a red. Queue jumps are where buses can pull around cars that are stacked up at an intersection. And we would remove bus pullouts so buses don't have to, a lot of bus drivers call those trap lanes, where they have to pull out and they get trapped and they can't get back into traffic, so we'd remove those. We would also improve those trail connections so that people can access the bus rapid transit. And you can see here the list of proposed BRT stations within the city of Littleton. Okay, so Shane mentioned some of the early action projects that came out of this. So that was one of the great things about this study, is that we were able to reserve some money from the project budget to carry some of the recommendations forward into that next step. It included conceptual design for Highline Canal crossing improvements. That is at-grade improvements at 3 different crossings, and preliminary designs at Arapahoe, and then Ridge and Cayley. Yes, thank you, Shane. And then access management recommendations. So we wanted to take a next step towards identifying what those recommendations might be to control and improve the access functions along Broadway. We also carried forward 3 mid-block crossing concepts, so that's at Bannock, Euclid, and Littleton Village. So Shane mentioned carrying it all forward. The key here is that we've really laid the foundation here for a regional coalition. I think all the partners agreed that they wanted to carry this forward. It's leading to potentially DRCOG taking those next steps towards funding the project, including pursuing FTA funding, so Federal Transit Administration funding. The city is already moving forward with HSIP funding to identify Broadway intersection designs at Mineral and Littleton Boulevard. And then, of course, pursuing other future grant opportunities. The IIJA and IRA both have lots and lots of funding still coming out, so lots of future grant opportunity funding opportunities there. So that's it. I think that is our presentation, and now we'll take questions. Thank you.
Council, questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, this, I guess, more of a planning and zoning question. I know we have Matt Knight in the background, so you can come up and join us if you'd like. But when you were doing the designs and you had these areas of single-family residential backing up onto Broadway, and I thought it was actually a really clever way to have that frontage road to solve that. It also... to put it, I guess, not too subtly, it's also not necessarily like the best and highest value or use of space in terms of like having that be our primary transportation and economic corridor. Did you have planning and zoning recommendations that came out of this, or was it using conditions as they currently exist?
Yeah, so we looked at conditions as they currently exist. In part of the report, we do look at areas that might redevelop, but we know that the single-family homes on Broadway, right, especially for the people who live there, are a bit of a hot potato. And so what we tried to do is come up with an alternative that would really make it more livable for the people who are there. We actually had a separate session with just the people who live on Broadway and say, okay, tell us what you're thinking, tell us what you want. And they said, you know, we kind of want to stay here, and we want it to be, we don't want Broadway to be so close to our front door. So how do we make that happen with this study? And so we thought that met that need from the residents now. And then if that area does develop in the future, if it is residential, then, you know, it could better allow people to get there if it's a little bit denser residential in the future. But I'll let Keith or Matt or people know what they're talking about add too. Okay, great.
Councilmember, if I may too, I think, you know, since this project was so focused on transportation and mobility, this was the right kind of approach here. But, you know, to have the conversation about future land use on Broadway would have been a much larger project, and probably one that Littleton should undertake ourselves as we move forward. But I think at this point, this is kind of a strategy to make things better with what we have, acknowledging that there may be much larger conversations to have in the future.
Councilmember Grove?
Can you talk a little bit about timing? You have these early action projects. Sure. When do you think those might start, and then will you move to the bigger projects with more partners once you get funding? And kind of what is your thinking in the overall timeline, which may be really long?
Yeah, and I'll explain these a little bit. I hope they splice the video so you're moving to different chairs. That's right.
No, thank you. We're back. We're back.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
I have some. He gave me some.
Doesn't have any options.
We should be working.
Okay, yeah, I think we're good. So let me explain the early action projects a little bit. We had $1 million in total funding for the grant. A little over $800,000 of that was used for the primary study, and then because we were the ones who were successful in getting the grant funding, we used those to focus on Littleton-specific things coming out of the study. And so these are really just kind of taking the next step in the study. As part of the funding, we can't go into implementing anything with study funding, but we can go up to 30% design. And so these are just some things that we said, let's take the next step and look at more specifically, because we know that they're areas we want to address in Littleton. So it was the trail crossings, access management, and then some mid-block crossings. So, and Kenna was actually the one who led the crossings, the Highline Canal crossing. So if you have specific questions, I'll defer to her. But yeah, I hope, does that answer your question?
So you're waiting for more funding before you actually design and implement?
Yes, so these are all completed as part of the original study, and then, so as part of kind of what we're doing, staff was proactive in addressing issues on Broadway, so that HSIP funding we applied for just after we applied for the Broadway funding, and so that project will actually look at the Broadway and Mineral and Broadway and Littleton intersection and do design and construction of those intersections coming out of this study. So that project just kicked off last month, but right now the consultant for that is gathering information and coming up with some concepts based on this study, and then we'll kind of start in earnest in mid-September. So we'll actually kind of go right from from a study into design and construction, which is nice. So, yeah, Keith.
Yeah, and Shane, I might just add, we did also kind of create a funding plan as part of the study. So broke the recommendations up into some bite-sized pieces that might be able to be funded over the shorter term. But really, what Broadway is begging for is a full reconstruction for the length of the corridor where we are able to implement these improvements and really kind of change where the curbs lie. And that's going to take some federal funding and a larger and longer timeline.
It makes a lot of sense to have a overall plan and then implement it in pieces, but with the overall plan in mind. So it's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Reichert? Oh, were you going to answer more?
Well, I was going to add, the estimated cost to do the entire length of Broadway is about $420 million. Just the Littleton section is about $185 million. So we'll be holding a bake sale next week. No, but obviously that'll take some effort and some regional partnerships to get there. So thanks.
Councilman Reichert?
Thank you. I appreciate this work, and I appreciate you guys. I'm very grateful for your interest and willingness to collaborate with the partners to make it because I worry about Littleton being an island within the overall network, so I really, really appreciate it. I have, one minor just question. So the video didn't really show a differentiation between the bike and the ped part other than colors. Is that a correct interpretation? Because I think we need a curb, I guess. Let me put my, no, the video that you showed, not on here, but
right.
Are you, when that is, I really want us to have a safe way for bikes to go up and down Broadway. I think that's a value that is really important. But that safe way probably also needs a curb between where the bikes are and where the peds are. And I'm asking if your recommendation is different than what I think you should be recommending, which is a leading question for sure.
We're actually dealing with this, and Keith, on some other projects, so I'll let you go ahead and speak to it.
Really timely question. So another project that HDR is helping the city with is the Mineral Station West cycle track and connectivity project to the Mineral Park and Ride. And this question is being worked out as we speak. What needs to separate that bike facility? What we discovered on Broadway is an on-street bike facility won't work, right? There are too many cars, too many buses. Having bikes on street won't work. We need them above the curb. But you're totally right, we need some delineation between pedestrians and cyclists. What that looks like, we're not entirely sure. But we need to start to figure that out citywide, I think, and come up with a plan that works for not just Broadway, but Mineral Station and any other off-street cycle tracks. What it is likely to look like is different materials or different colors on the bikeway, and then some kind of buffer, whether it's a 1-foot detectable edge buffer, where a vision impaired person might be able to feel with a cane when they're exiting the sidewalk and onto the bikeway, and just make sure that that is detectable for them. Or maybe you use planters or that kind of thing on a corridor like Broadway, where we might have the space for it. So design details that haven't quite been figured out, but you're right, it has to be delineated some way.
And that's just me reading a video, obviously more than I should have.
Yeah,
so,
and the video, it's just conceptual level.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
So just taking a step back, in many ways, Shane, this appears to me to be like you do the plan so you can get more money. Like this is essentially just a way to raise funds, which I think is great. I want more federal money. I would really like us to be parsimonious about or thoughtful, and I would like the council to be engaged in two kind of big issues. One is the bus lanes, and I understand bus lanes aren't going into us, but we're at a huge transition point as a community around the sustainability of our rapid transit system. And so I want us to be really thoughtful about making big investments in a system that right now is not showing that it's sustainable. And so I would ask that we have a council-involved process if we're trying to go for money that involves the bus system. The other thing that I think we need to have the council involved again is the question that Councilmember or Mayor Pro Temp brought up, is the long-term land use of housing on Broadway, because I'm not convinced that that's our future in 40 years. And so those two issues, which are not the whole part of the plan, but those components of the plan, I'm hoping we have a really more public engagement part versus a staff-driven part, just because those feel really important. And then I'm very, very excited about the prioritization at Euclid and Broadway in particular. One thing that may not be on our radar is that Euclid and Broadway is very close to the Transitions Program that is run by LPS. And so the Transitions Program is a program for handicapped adults as they transition from being between 18 and 21 and learn life skills. And so there's a lot of different people with disabilities that are using that space right at Euclid and Broadway and literally going to the bus stop there. And so that, for me, is a very high priority for improving, because I saw those people working and using that and making sure that's easily accessible. I'm glad you prioritized it now, and I would encourage you to keep it as a priority. And then the Littleton Boulevard work that you guys are doing, obviously LPS has a huge presence there, and I would encourage you to also to partner with them. But also, South Metro Housing Authority owns the Wells Fargo building, and so having them engaged in those planning processes so that the future use of that land is included, I just would like you to do that. And I'm confident that was on your radar, and I'm just blowing my own horn. But thank you very much for all this work. I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Yeah, it seems to me that the work that's been done on South Broadway from 25 through Inglewood, probably just past Hamden, I mean, they've done a beautiful job, that whole stretch there. So it's, I mean, does this plan include redoing some of that stretch? To me, looks great the way it is and very functional.
Yeah, so Inglewood was a great partner, I'll say that. So Inglewood, especially in that downtown area, that's how they want Broadway to look, right? And so that won't change much. They really want to expand that cross section north and south through their section of Broadway, so.
I think the
I guess my
question-
comment is we should just spend the money on Littleton. Let's move forward.
Okay, great, yeah.
Sorry, Council. Yeah.
I think we're good.
All right, any other questions or comments, Council? Just say thanks for this presentation. It's great to see that. It's very aspirational, and I know when we get into the meat of things moving forward, hopefully you can look under some couch cushions and find some pennies hanging around there. So.
Sounds good.
Great.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you. All right, going back out. So, where am I here? So, general business B, C and D, resolutions 89, 90, and 91 will table until after the ordinance is on second reading here. So we'll move to item 10, ordinances on second reading and public hearings. We have a couple here. So, first up, we have ordinance 2024, an ordinance on second reading amending various titles and sections of the Littleton City Code pertaining to nuisances and nuisance abatements. We'll have a presentation by the city attorney, I believe, here.
I'll just start just to bring us forward here to where we are. Council's heard several study sessions on this topic. The study sessions have focused on how code changes will fit into our code compliance processes, business processes. So for tonight, we truly are focused on the code and second reading of code changes to update the nuisance code that we have. And for that, it will be handled by Reed Betzing, City Attorney.
Got two clickers.
Too soon.
Too soon. Thank you. And as the city manager has mentioned, we came before council a couple of different times. Once was on April 9th, and then a follow-up meeting a few weeks ago on July 23rd, where generally we were providing an overview of how our code compliance department functions and how we typically work. In terms of the nuisance code, this was identified kind of a number of years ago in terms of a tool that would be beneficial for code compliance to use. As we've talked about, you know, most of the times this sort of tool would be unnecessary. Our code compliance department is largely complaint-based, so the way that it works is that an individual will either call the city or email the city or go through SeeClickFix to report an issue. And it's our code compliance department who will go about investigating that issue. We'll go out to the location and take a look and see if there's a violation. We'll try to make contact with the property owner or resident if they're there and have a discussion with them about what it is that we're seeing that is technically not in compliance with the various codes that the city has adopted. If we don't meet with anyone, we'll send a notice. And that notice generally says you have X amount of days to come into compliance. And then we'll do a follow-up investigation. It's at that point where historically we've had some challenges in terms of which direction we want to go. From a purely technical standpoint, what can happen at that point is we'll either provide a continuance, provide another notification, or a lot of times we'll go about and we'll issue a summons. We try to stay away from summons, so when I say summons, I'm talking about a court process. Someone's getting a ticket, it's punishable by a fine, it can technically be punishable by jail to come into compliance. Not the route that we would typically like to go. And the reason we don't want to do that is because that whole court process actually takes quite a bit of time. There's the time to serve the ticket, there's the time in which the individual would have to go to court, i.e. their appearance date. There would be the time involved with being advised of that charge, whether or not they wanted to meet with the prosecutor, whether or not they wanted to go to trial. And all that time, the property is remaining in a non-compliant state. And that is not something that the city wants because no one's benefiting from that. We have a property that's not in compliance. We have neighbors that are being affected depending on what the violation is. And so the whole idea of the nuisance code is another tool. As Matt and I talked to, and we had Jeremy from Code Compliance talk to you recently, 98% of the folks that Code Compliance contacts are going to end with an individual saying, okay, and cleaning up the issue. Most of the issues that we deal with from a Code Compliance standpoint are what you would typically see in terms of rubbish, weeds are often an issue. Those are kind of the big ones. In the winter, we deal with a lot of snow removal. And so this is literally just another tool in which we could get compliance. So what a nuisance ordinance does is it allows for a civil process, a process in which the city could come in if it, after providing sufficient notice, it could come in and take care of whatever that issue is. So generally what we are speaking to is we're talking about weeds, we're talking about trash, rubbish, things that have accumulated on a property. And one of the times that we would typically use this is when we have owners that are not being compliant. They're not answering, we can't get a hold of them, they live in a different state. Those are the issues in which we can't actually serve someone with a ticket, so what do? We've had provisions within our city code in various areas that allow for the city to actually do this. But one of the issues that we found in terms of taking a look at this tool is that there were a lot of inconsistencies. Some parts of the code had not been touched since the 70s. Other parts of the code were in different areas. They had differing time limits in terms of what it was or time in which to come into compliance. There wasn't really an appeal process, or it wasn't very clear. So we had some due process considerations. And generally things were just kind of messy. So in going through the nuisance ordinance, the proposed changes really hit on kind of three different points of this. One, it cleans up the code. So within the various sections of our code, which spoke to differing timelines, which had different definitions, what this does is it standardizes a lot of that process. And the process is pretty straightforward in terms of requiring a notice. What's in the notice? When are we giving the notice? How much time is someone legally being afforded to actually comply with that notice? How much time is being given for an individual to actually appeal that notice? If they said, hey, wait a minute, I don't think this is right, or this isn't junk, or whatever, I'm having someone gonna do this, or it's not my property, whatever the reason. And we have a procedure in place where someone can appeal that, and they'll appeal it, and we'll actually go in front of one of our judges, one of our associate judges, perhaps, over at our court, and we'll have a hearing to determine whether or not those nuisance conditions exist. And after all these provisions, what could happen is the city could be legally afforded with the ability to go onto the property and take care of the issue. That's all this does, is provides another tool. I would say we do have this currently in our code, as I've mentioned, in various sections with varying notice requirements, but it's used very rarely. And I don't foresee that this is actually going to be used any more than it currently has. Perhaps in a few cases. We have some cases in which it would be kind of troubling. So one of the ones, and it's actually a great story, is Columbine Square. So Columbine Square, for any of those individuals who've driven by there where the old O'Toole's was, it's currently slated for redevelopment, but we've had a lot of issues. And we've had reports come in, and I'm sure council has received some of those complaints that people have just been dumping trash and debris and whatnot on there. In this case, it's actually being abated right now. I know there was a fire at O'Toole's, and O'Toole's is a different owner, but that's also something in which our code compliance has actually been working really super hard with both of those property owners to address those issues. It may not be as fast as what a lot of the neighbors may want, but it is getting done. And I will say it's a testament to our code compliance and their abilities to work with individuals. One of the issues that this could have presented is one of the property owners has been challenging for this city to get to work with or from time to time. And in the event that we would never make contact with this property owner, unfortunately, there's a new property management company who's been great to work with. Credit to Jeremy, our code compliance manager, for working with them and reaching a resolution. But in the case where we couldn't do that, this would allow us to go in and to abate the property and to build the property. That's all this does. It's another tool. I don't anticipate that it would be used a ton. It's just really there to provide an alternative to going through a criminal court proceeding. That's what this is doing, cleaning it up, standardizing the process, as well as adding an administrative fee schedule for the time that it takes to go through this process. So going outside of the criminal fines, allowing for properties to come into compliance a little bit quicker than what they otherwise normally would through a criminal process. That's what this does. Sorry, I've got two clickers. They both don't work. So generally that's it. Hopefully it's a little easier to understand than what the previous language was, but I'm happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Council, any questions about this? Councilmember Grove.
I just want to confirm you treat property owners that are owned by a corporation or the same as you do an individual property owner?
Correct.
Any other questions? All right, seeing no questions, this is an ordinance on second reading, so I'm going to open public comment period at 8:09. There's no one signed up to speak. Would somebody like to come up and speak? Pam?
My name is Pam Chadbourne, a block and a half from here, so I have a couple of things. First, the city for many years had a free leaf drop-off for composting. It had a hazardous waste drop-off and a large item drop-off, and they were free, as I recall, and you could take your stuff to the Bellevue Service Center and, just drop it off, and you could take leaves somewhere for free. In the past 5 years, those have made for charge. They've been made that the people have to pay. And I'm going to suggest that if this is mostly targeted at rubbish and landscaping and stuff like that, the city look at restoring those being free. Especially with 3A passing, I'm not saying 3A pays for them, I'm saying that 3A pays for other stuff, and the general fund ought to have money to take care of this again. They aren't expensive, they're a huge benefit to many people who own just regular property. And I'd like the city to think about restoring that. If the city is going to be looking for rubbish and yard waste and trash, city, please help citizens deal with those things, as we did for decades when we had less money. So that's my first ask. Please ask staff to look into that. Second, the city attorney makes this sound very reasonable. I didn't hear the proactive enforcement, and so I'm not a fan of proactive enforcement. I think we're too small to do that, and I don't think it's Littleton. But anyway, I'm not sure I heard that and not sure I understand the proposal fully. I will say I was around for the Windermere Circle demolition, if people remember that. The city had a long, painful process, which did involve trying to get the owner to court. The owner did not show up time after time. The person hid on the property. For the neighbors, it was frightening. And so there needs to be a way to handle those kind of situations. They occur very rarely, and they are hugely impactful to the neighborhoods, and they have to be handled. So anyway, just wanted to ask you to ask staff to restore some free services for folks to get rid of trash on their property. And I don't understand where the proactive enforcement went, but I would like it to be gone if it's there. And otherwise, sounds reasonable. Thanks.
Does anybody else in the audience wish to speak during? Frank?
Good evening, City Council. Frank Atwood from District 4. My concern was I didn't fully hear an appeals process. But then again, I could often have slept through it. But I'd like to see if a flow chart for an appeals process. Especially if it's a proactive code enforcement issue. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this item? See no one, I'm going to close the public comment period at 8:13. Does council have any further questions?
Mayor, if I can just clarify a couple of the public comments.
Sure.
So I guess as it relates to the appeal process, the appeal process is in the ordinance at 7.1.8F. Basically, you can appeal in writing within 7 days of receiving a notice, and that's the process.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Council, is motion?
Yep. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance 2024 on second reading, amending various titles and sections of the Littleton City Code related to nuisances and nuisance abatements.
I can second.
We have a motion and a second. All right, council, any further discussion on this item?
Yes.
Councilmember Wrighton.
Yes, so I'm going to offer amendment tonight on this. This should not come as a surprise to my colleagues, because I talked about this in our study sessions, but first, accountability, transparency is important when it comes to noticing people. I fully support that. I get the idea of creating another tool in order to really help people and businesses stay in compliance with the law. I think that's great. I mean, currently, we've heard from our staff in code compliance that they do their best work, or they do their best to truly work with property owners and individuals before it gets to litigation. Great. But I did look at the code, what we're proposing to amend tonight, but nowhere in that code is the human side of this outlined, which is that looking out for extenuating circumstances of people. I think it's being done practically, but that's not a requirement. And so I want a little bit of a safety net written into this because I don't like the stick approach, or I'm a little leery of the stick side of putting a lien on somebody's property because that really can do a lot of damage and be kind of an unintentional consequence for something that we're trying to do. So that's what I'm going to be proposing tonight. I understand this is probably going to be used not often, but just because it's not something that's going to be used often doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking about future scenarios that really could hurt people. So that will come as soon as we're done with discussion.
Any further discussion or comments, council?
Are you going to read the amendment?
She said she was going to wait till after people had discussion.
Yeah, if you have other comments.
More crazy socks, so we can talk about those. Yeah, when are these aware? There you go. I don't know if that's crazy. Yeah, that's I like the article, it is. It's not crazy, it's a smart move. All right, we got close up. Okay.
1, 2, 3.
All
right, Councilmember Ryden.
Yes, so the amendment I'm going to propose, it's just going to look out for those that might not be able to afford the cost of code compliance. And I want it in writing in the code that basically financial aid will be possible. So I move to amend in the nuisance code, I move to amend 7.1.6, notice of violation by adding Roman numeral 7 to read, quote, persons unable to comply due to financial hardship may be afforded financial assistance, close quote.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the ordinance. Council, any discussion on the amendment?
And just to add in there, there is a little bit of some ambiguity and vagueness in there intentionally because it's right, hardship may be afforded financial assistance. I just want some kind of safety net built in there that gets some coverage to some of those, again, unintended consequences. And I would leave that up to our wonderful staff to decide what that could look like.
Mayor Pro Tem, since you seconded.
I think Councilmember Ryden summarized it pretty well, but I would be in support of an amendment that specifically calls out in part of our policy and process that we at least consider it as an option. But I do think it is sufficiently lenient enough to still allow staff to complete enforcement in the manner at discretion that they need. So thank you for proposing the amendment.
Councilmember Grove.
How would you qualify, I don't know if it's a question for Councilmember Ryden or staff, how do you qualify if somebody is eligible for hardship and where would this money come from? Just from the general fund or would there be something set aside? And how much do you envision you would need?
So I'll answer part until Jim talks about money. In terms of the qualifications, I think that would be something that we would have to develop internally in terms of kind of where that was. Would that be based on AMI? Would that be based upon certain financial affidavits that would be provided? So we would have to determine what those qualifications would be. So something we would have to discuss internally. In terms of where those monies would come from, most likely it's the general fund. Currently, I will tell you that code compliance. Oh wait, we're back. I just hit the button to stop talking. Code compliance, our budget typically for abatements for an entire year is about $25,000. I'm not sure if that's up for 2025 or if we've established that, but it's a pretty small amount of money when you start thinking about going into properties, which is one of the reasons why we've wanted the ability to recoup some of those costs when possible. But generally, those monies would come from the general fund until council identifies some other location for it.
Essentially, based on the kind of the criteria that we would have to come up with if this amendment were adopted, we would recover less of the costs that the city has put out on a given abatement, which would reduce the amount of code violation abatement that we could do within a given budget, if that's clear. If, just in round numbers, if the budget were $10,000 and we had to help with $5,000, then we would only have $5,000 to go and mitigate code violations on properties. If the property owner were responsible for those costs of cleanup on their property, then the city would have the $10,000 to mitigate more of this work across the city.
Councilman Reichert.
I want a couple comments, really. I want to say thank you to Councilwoman Ryden. Jesus, God, I'm struggling today. I really appreciate everybody's help for putting this forward. I think it's important for us to acknowledge a couple things. First of all, this absolutely adds to the workload of staff, and staff's going to have to create criteria for this, what it counts as, financial hardship, and I think that's true. And I think, quite frankly, the additional time that staff is going to spend developing this criteria, at least over the next year, is going to be more than the money that we forego from the $25,000 budget. And I think that's the reality. But I also want to say $25,000 is literally budget dust in our budget. It is a rounding error. And so if that's our kind of commitment to cleanup, I just don't feel like we're making a financially risky kind of move here. So, but thank you very much, Councilwoman Ryden, for this amendment.
Councilmember Peters.
Is it typical to pass an amendment without the criteria? It would be one question, and then is it fair to ask how staff feels about this?
Reed might answer the first part, and then I can answer the second part.
Just in terms of the first part, I would say that's more policy-based, and so I think it's appropriate to establish kind of the question and the policy to come outside of the code, so it's not atypical.
I just want to piggyback off on that. Is that any different than the policy is right now, though?
No, and I think that's to the next point. I would say that this, working with people to afford their abatement work is something that we do in our process as we do now, more with our code compliance processes, procedures. I think this code requirement would be one more kind of consideration that we'd have to figure out and have a separate policy for within how we do our work. I think there are a range of procedures that staff uses already to work with people. Getting the work done is our goal. So we'll work with folks with extensions and alternative ways of getting it done. As the city's able to mature more of a neighborhood services approach, I know our staff envisions some kind of volunteer corps that might be able to help folks get work done when most of it is trash and weeds and things like that. We don't have that in place now. I think to answer the question, this would be something that would require an administrative complexity that we don't have now, but we certainly want to be responsive to council, and we'll certainly do that. I don't think that the criteria would be part of the ordinance at this point. That would be more of a policy that we would have to develop to ensure that we have equity among residents.
I guess I'm hesitant about the amendment because it feels like we're trying to clean up the code tonight, and this feels like muddying it again. I also would love to have some suggestions on community cleanup days like were mentioned in the public comment. I have had people ask me about
Yep.
that at our community meeting, and I've had emails about it as well, especially with leaves. I mean, I love raking leaves and I cannot get rid of them fast enough. So I think that is really relevant, and if that's a very Littleton type thing to me, and that feels like a more concrete way to help in a situation, maybe prevent from getting to this point, so.
Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem?
Sorry, one last point. The proposed amendment would not correct me if I'm wrong, but it wouldn't prohibit staff from having the discretion to use all the other tools available in the toolbox, correct?
It wouldn't. I think
Okay.
we would receive a lot more questions from anyone who sees that there might be financial assistance available. So we'd have to work those all through that process. We would have to come up with those criteria, whether it's income or project amount. We just have to have that separate administrative process while we're working with the other methods that we have.
Okay, just confirming. Thank you.
And as you all remember, during our study session, I asked about putting that into code, and the recommendation was, please don't put that level of detail into the code because that's not what's needed. So this I view as a policy statement saying, hey, we're the kind of city council that recognizes there is an equitability among our residents, and we want to be able to meet people where they are. That's the social worker in me who says, hey, we want to be able to account for that, and I want to give coverage in the code to really empower our staff to say, okay, we want to be able to actually do that in real time. Right now, they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts because they believe in that philosophy, but that could change with the administration or change, and I'm thinking long-term with this code, which we are cleaning up tonight, so it hopefully doesn't have to be changed repeatedly.
Before we get back to you, while I fully support the intention of this, I think it doesn't necessarily fit in the code right here, and I think it doesn't change anything. The discretion for how to enforce this and utilize these tools is still with staff, and this just keeps it with staff. So I think it just muddies the water a little bit more. So that's where I'm on this. Councilmember Grove.
I agree with what's been said before in terms of what the mayor said. And I like the idea of the community cleanups that were mentioned as a resource, Eagle Scouts or whatever, or anything. Where I run into some concern is that as a property owner, we have a certain responsibility to keep our property so that it's a good member of the community, so to speak, to not have weeds and rubbish. It sounds to me like if somebody has surgery and can't clean up something, that the city would work with them and say, okay, get it done later. Also, and this may not happen, but it could, it's a slippery slope. Well, if Joe doesn't have to pay to trim his trees, then I've got hardship. I'm not going to trim my trees. And before you know it, then code compliance has a little bit of trouble when the word of mouth is that it really doesn't have the bite we think it does because we can get financial relief when maybe it's not appropriate to give certain people financial relief. So I am not supportive of this amendment.
Any other comments, council? All right, well, seeing none, we have a motion and a second on an amendment. And let me see if I can get back to the amendment and reread the amendment here. Councilmember Wright, do you have it in front of you? Oh, I got it right here. So you move to amend 7.1.6, notice of violation by adding a Roman numeral 7 to read, persons unable to comply due to financial hardship may be afforded financial assistance. Correct. Okay. Voting is open. I guess this is on just the amendment.
The vote on the amendment is 3 in favor, with council members Grove, Schlachter, Peters, and Driscoll voting no. The motion to amend fails.
Back to the main motion of approving the ordinance. What ordinance is it here? Ordinance 2024. Any further discussion on we'll call it the nuisance ordinance here. So.
Mayor, may I make one comment?
Sure.
Just want to note, staff has heard the interest in more neighborhood services. And we think of community cleanups along the same vein as household hazardous waste services and kind of a myriad of other of those kinds of services. And we also think that those would be a really nice enhancement to what the city can do over the next year.
Give it a second, it might
As
come
we look
back.
forward to potentially some new sales tax revenue, potentially, that's high on our list of something we'd like to bring back to you for how we can have a much more organized approach to neighborhood services. So I want to give our staff some credit for thinking about it, but you won't be seeing that in this year's budget because we don't have a lot of funding. Thanks, Mayor.
You get to talk all the time.
The IGA. Marijuana question has to be tonight. Yeah, because it's Tabor and I have to get that in by Friday.
Kyle, come back.
The intent is already.
Yeah, we are going to break for a 5-minute recess at 8:33 p.m. We will adjourn at 8:35 p.m.
Ooh, that's a new graphic. No. So we're back from recess. All right, so we did have a motion and a second on the ordinance 20, second reading amending various titles and sections of the Littleton City Code related to nuisances and nuisance abatements. Just want to make sure that we actually open this meeting. It's not. Any further discussion, council? Seeing none. The voting's open.
I get the shot.
The vote is 6 in favor with Councilmember Ryden voting no. The motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, on ordinances on second reading and public hearings, ordinance 21, 2024, an ordinance on second reading submitted to a registered electors of the city of Littleton, Colorado ballot issue regarding a proposed additional increase 4% tax on the retail sale of marijuana and retail marijuana products. We'll have a presentation by staff and then
Very brief comments from Assistant City Manager Kathleen Osher.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. So this has been an issue that Council has been discussing for a little bit more than a year and a half. The idea of raising our marijuana sales tax for retail marijuana. And what you did take a look at this last election season. This did not move forward. However, at your February retreat, you said that it was something that you wanted to have a discussion on, and so on July 23rd, we had a study session. You indicated your interest in bringing this forward. So tonight's public hearing is to take that next step forward and put it on the ballot for November 5th. So the purpose of this increase would be dedicated to public safety and homelessness prevention services. That would include continued support and a dedicated source of funding for our mental health crisis response, proactive safety programs, as well as prevention services for our work with the Tri-Cities Homelessness Action Plan. We did take a look at the landscape of tax rates across the region. Our current rate of 8.25 would jump to 12.25 and still put us kind of in the high part of that middle as it relates to other communities. So with that very brief presentation, staff is recommending the approval of moving this forward to voters for November 5th, and I would be happy to answer any questions or make the city attorney available for answering any of those questions.
council, any questions for staff?
Okay, on that slide, you have 3%, but we're looking at 4%. Or what am I missing?
It's a 4% increase on the table.
If you look at the final column.
That 3% is our current special retail.
Plus
That's the.
marijuana is
Right,
8.
great.
Add 4 percentage points to 12.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council? Seeing no questions, this is ordinance on second reading. I'm going to open the public comment portion at 8:42. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this? You guys can figure out who wants to come first.
I'm Pam Chapter. I still live a block and a half from here, so I feel like I don't want us to move to the higher edge of the range. For whatever reason, I just feel that's excessive or pushy, but whatever. But I do want to say the purpose of this for co-responders, what I have heard co-responders with officers is very important to me. I've had occasion when people near my house have needed help. When you call the non-emergency number, you're told, oh, there's no co-responders here. I do not want to call an officer if I do not know that there's someone who can handle mental health. And that is no reflection on our officers or their training. It is my fear. And so it's very important to me that this pay for more co-responders. So thank you for doing that.
Frank?
Good evening, City Council. I live in District 4. My name is Frank Atwood. I like to believe I'm a pragmatic incrementalist. And so I believe the question that I haven't heard addressed by City Council is, what is the optimum level of taxation? I watch you annually put taxes before the public and wonder when or if it will stop, or at what level of taxation will you stop? Some people argue that the optimum level of taxation was in the 1960s when I think we were a bit more optimistic, robust, and a healthier economy. Also, I don't know if this is a, do we still call this a sin tax? I'd be curious to hear City Council comment if this is a sin tax. That concludes my comments with regards to the taxation, with regards to hearing earlier comments about grant funding.
Frank, is it related specifically to this ordinance?
No.
Then
But you'll hear it later. Thank you.
I'm sure we will. Thank you. Anybody else in the audience wish to speak on this item? See no one, I'm going to close the public comment at, it looks like 8:45. City Council, any questions? Is there a motion?
I
Mayor-
move to approve ordinance 212024, an ordinance on second reading, submitting to the registered electors of the city of Littleton, Colorado, a ballot issue regarding a proposed additional increase of a 4.0% tax on the retail sale of marijuana and retail marijuana products.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. City Attorney, do you have something?
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple things to note for council on the particular ordinance that's before them. There are actually two Scribner errors that, just for the record, we will be correcting prior to your vote. So the first one is the sixth whereas clause, just within the recitals, speaks to $538,000. With changes that council recently made to operating hours, we actually updated that number to $646,000. So the sixth whereas clause will be an anticipated revenue of $646,000 annually.
And on that, there's a discrepancy. The
Well, that's, she was going to clarify. Got it. Okay, hopefully we're back. So just to clarify, the amount is correct in the ballot question. It is merely just the recital which listed an outdated number. So that will be corrected. In section 2, we talk about.
Yep.
In section 2, we talk about the effective date. In the effective date, the Scrivener's errors, it says January 1st, 2024. That is actually going to be January 1st, 2025. So those are the two changes that will be occurring to this ordinance that you will be considering now. Go.
So yeah, the only thing is the ballot question got updated, but the ordinance itself had an old number, so. You guys still have green lights on your mics, so.
Yes.
Are we still broadcasting? Okay. Is it okay if we just use this mic since it's working? Well, we still have 3 more items.
Mr. Mayor, I have an amendment I would like to propose. I would like to read the language of my amendment and then may offer a short explanation, if that's all right. Well, I'll try. So I would like to, on the ballot, replace the language of an additional 4% tax with.
Test.
You didn't actually make a
Okay.
Oh.
Just
Thank you.
Point of clarification. You just
Thank
said I
you.
would
I'm
like-
making a motion to make an amendment to the ballot language to replace of an additional 4% tax with of an additional 4 percentage points to the city's existing special tax. And the reason that I'm making this amendment is I am a statistics professor, and we are actually increasing the amount of the tax by 4 percentage points. If we were increasing it by 4%, we would have multiplied our current rate by 1.04 to result in a new rate that is much less than our intention. And so I'm just trying to make the math be as precise as possible. Thank you.
I'll
Is there a
second.
sec- We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Do you want to,
I feel like I explained it.
anybody else have anything to add on that? Mayor Pro Tem?
Staff, is that, so you can double check us? I'm not trying to argue against the statistics professor. But is that amendment, would that amendment actually be reflecting the intent of the original motion?
It would be another way to reflect the intent of the original motion. I'm comfortable with the current language, but I can certainly understand the Councilmember Reichert's suggestion for sure.
The language I read was provided by the staff attorney. I mean, council's attorney, city attorney.
I don't see it the same way as if we increased it by 4%, 4% of the 3.75, but an additional 4 percentage points. I don't really see the need for this motion, so I'm not, it says, lays it out in the ballot, 7% total, so I don't see there's any need for it. But anybody else have any comment? Well, seeing none, we have a motion and a second to amend ordinance 21. I believe the voting is open. Do you guys have it on your screen? Do you guys see everything? All right. Huh?
I have the voting came up.
You guys
on
can
my
vote.
little
Well, let's
screen.
try vote, because I can't see my screen, so. Did everyone vote?
I didn't.
I did. It's
Mine's dead.
Well, let's see what happened. Can you see? You can't see anything. I see it as 4-2. 4 for, and 2 against on my screen right here, but.
What happened to the 7th person?
I don't know. Who didn't
It's
vote?
me.
You, are you unable to vote?
I'm unable to vote. Okay, do we want to do a thumbs?
We can do a thumbs up, thumbs down for this, since apparently we're still broadcasting. So,
Points sound great. Do it. Sure.
every thumbs up, thumbs down?
I think it's 5
Yeah,
5 to 2.
5 to 2.
Great. All right, we have an amended motion, or amended ordinance 21. Is there any further discussion or comments on the amended ordinance? Mayor Pro Tem?
Just real quick, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that we did council received letters from industry partners advocating for a slightly lower rate. I actually do agree that we should be proposing it at the rate we do because we have a significant need in this area. And I think the additional funding is not going to exclude any of our retailers from the market space. So I'm going to continue to move this forward as proposed, but appreciate the feedback from the retail marijuana community. That's it.
Any other comments, Councilmember Peters?
Oh, I pushed the wrong button. My bad, my bad. I expressed at the study session, I don't think we should be going all the way up either, but I already expressed that. Just wanted to make it clear. I think it's a lot to add, but.
All right, any other comments? So we have a motion to approve ordinance 21 on second reading submitted to the registered electors of the city of Littleton, Colorado, a ballot issue regarding a proposed additional increase of a 4 percentage point tax increase on the retail sale of marijuana and retail marijuana products.
We're going to have to do a hand vote.
All right, so we'll do a thumbs up, thumbs down again. See.
The vote is 7 in favor, the motion carries.
All right, so that was ordinance B. We go back as we tabled, let's see, where we went to resolution, you're the seat with the squiggle. Resolution 89, 2024, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between Arapahoe County Clerk and Recorder of the City of Littleton regarding the conduct and administration of November 5th, 2024 coordinated ballot election.
To the city clerk.
You want to just talk about all three of them since the exact same three things?
So thank you, Mayor, thank you, Council. These are IGAs that we normally would have on consent. They're standard operating agreements that we enter into with our 3 counties whenever we're going to coordinate, whether that's a candidate election or a ballot question. In the interest of full transparency, we didn't want them on a consent agenda, knowing that we may not pass this taxation, marijuana taxation question. And so for transparency, we didn't want to enter into agreements not knowing or having the appearance that we had a preconceived decision, right? So that's why they're coming up now. But normally these would be consent agenda items, and they just lay out the role of the counties versus us and what they'll do and what we won't. They're pretty standard.
Sounds good. And if council doesn't object, I'll read all 3 resolutions. We can vote them at once. They're not ordinances. They don't have to be taken separately. So, all right. So I read Resolution 89. We also have Resolution 90, 2024, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between Douglas County Clerk and Recorder and the City of Littleton regarding the conduct and administration of the November 5th, 2024 coordinated mail ballot election. And then Resolution 91, 2024, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between Jefferson County Clerk and Recorder and the City of Littleton regarding the conduct and administration of the November 5th, 2024 coordinated mail ballot election. Is there any questions for the clerk? So I will move to approve resolutions 89, 90, and 91.
Second. Okay.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the 3 resolutions authorizing IGAs with the various counties. Oh, Pam, you are back up there. We might be able to vote again here on your button. All right, so any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to open the voting, hopefully.
The vote is 7 in favor, the motion carries unanimously.
All right, and then next up on the agenda, we have a motion to go into executive session, but if it's if no one on council objects, we'll postpone the executive session to the September 3rd meeting, since. Great. All right, sounds good. So we'll move that to September 3rd, and then we are adjourned.